how Deloitte approaches global employer branding. We are really excited to have Deloitte join us today and talk to you about how they built such an awesome brand. Just a couple webinar tips for you guys before we get started. Make sure you're dialed in through your telephone or through your mic and speaker through your computer. You'll all be muted just so we can avoid some of that background noise. And make sure you ask questions throughout in the Q&A pane. We will make sure we get to as many of those as possible at the end of our session. And now I would like to introduce our featured speakers today. From Deloitte, we have Jennifer Powell. She is the Talent Acquisition Branding Lead, as well as Targ Dawas. He is the Global Talent Acquisition and Mobility Leader at Deloitte. We're thrilled to have them join us today. And also from Glassdoor, we have Mike Walsh, Senior Manager of Product Marketing. And today we are going to discuss a ton of great information about how to take your brand now and take that across the globe. Make sure you join in on the conversation. So use the hashtag GDChat. We want to make this a very social and interactive session. Quickly run through our agenda. We're going to talk about what an employer brand is and why you should invest in it. What does that mean to have a strong global brand? Then we're going to launch into the good stuff. So Deloitte's going to share with us their global brand, how they took it from the U.S. and went vastly beyond that, and give us a couple actionable insights as to what the first steps you can take to take your brand global. And then we'll wrap up with a couple questions. So now I would like to pass things on over to Mike Walsh to talk about what an employer brand is.
Awesome. Thank you, Shay. All right. So let me first start off with kind of level set here on what an employer brand is and kind of tell you about why you need to develop one and how to make it global and then turn it into localized messaging. All right, so when we think of an employer brand, you think back to kind of marketing theory and what a brand is really. And one school of thought thinks of a brand as a promise that you make to your customers. If you kind of apply that to an employer, it's really the promise that an employer is making to the employee on what it's like to actually work at that company. So it's really all about a reputation. Another way of thinking about it is Jeff Bezos has a good quote around a brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. So it's really about how your brand and how your company or organization is perceived when you're not there to speak about it and kind of defend it and put your messaging in front. And so building that strong organizational employer brand is really a major beacon when it comes to attracting top talent and getting the people that are really going to take your company to the next level into your organization. It's a way to become an employer of choice versus just somebody filling out a box and applying a resume through a career site. Your employer brand is also something that job seekers are interacting with throughout their entire job search. So as job seekers are looking at where they want to take their career next, they enter this stage of awareness, and they're out there looking at companies, speaking with friends, looking up different companies on the web to see what is out there and where they should take their career. Obviously, your brand is a big part of that. It really helps to attract candidates in the initial stages of the job search process. But it goes beyond much more than the awareness stage. It flows through everywhere from whether or not the candidate's going to decide to apply to the job, what type of interviews they should expect, right? Google was pretty famous for having these crazy brain teasers back in the day, and that was one element of their employer brand that's kind of been softened lately. Ultimately, your employer brand affects the job seeker from whether or not they're going to take that offer and how they're going to portray the company as an employee and be kind of a brand ambassador for your company to help promote your employer brand and recruit more candidates. So it just goes beyond. I want you to think about it as something that goes beyond just the awareness stage, but something that carries throughout the whole entire candidate decision-making process. Another stat that we had found is that almost 70% of candidates would not take a job at a company with a bad reputation, even if they were unemployed. That kind of speaks to the strong power of an employer brand and being an employer of choice. We all I mean, if you knew that a restaurant had a horrible rating and did not have, the greatest cleanliness standards, you probably wouldn't go to that restaurant. That decision is just magnified like a million times when it comes to where you're going to work. So those interactions are much more important, and therefore the investment in your employer brand is a really strategic and critical investment that you need to undertake and take a look at to really attract and build and foster that culture that you want in your company. So I hope I've kind of sold you a little bit on the value of an employer brand and what it is. But now we want to, the part of this, the reason why we wanted Deloitte in this webinar is because they've done the hard work of building that employer brand in the first place, but then they've taken it to the next level. They've taken it to the level of personalizing it and localizing it for different audiences around the world. So we're going to talk with Deloitte about how they've done that and how they approached it and organized themselves around this mission and this vision. And it's going to lead to some really cool results that hopefully you guys can understand and implement with your companies. So why localize an employer brand? Well, simply put, one-size-fits-all messaging and positioning doesn't work. We know that from years and years of marketing, right? So we know that a one-size-fits-all model isn't the way you're going to attract customers because people from all different parts of the world and different demographics and different experiences and backgrounds have different priorities and visions or needs that they want to discuss and that should be met. When you kind of pull that down to the employer side of the world, candidates and employees in different parts of the world have different value systems. So this isn't necessarily like a massive study that we've done on in this chart here, but this is showing you kind of, it's to jog kind of the conversation on, different candidates from different countries and cultures value different things. So, some folks may value compensation more than work-life balance and vice versa. Others may want more stability. Others may want more leadership opportunities. And so there's lots of studies that are coming out now that are showing that, different candidates have these different needs that must be addressed in order to really attract them and resonate your employer branding message with them so that they don't tune out, they don't shut down, and that they're going to come and look at your place as a great place to work. Kind of looking at the cost of not doing this, right? So let's say you don't invest in localizing your employer brand. Well, that means you're going to maybe miss out in, reaching that global audience and tapping into real tough local markets where other firms are competing. If you're, let's say, a U.S. company and you're competing over in the UK or in Singapore or something, you're not only competing against other multinational companies, you're also competing against really strong in-country employers. And those in-country employers are, they know the audience needs better, right? Because they've lived it, they're there. They understand how to communicate and what messages resonate with those candidates. So you have to look beyond just your borders and kind of really be empathetic and look at what the candidates' needs are in those local markets. Some of the metrics around this, right, that you could expect if you didn't invest in a localized employer brand, well, your applicant quality will probably suffer, right, as you attract more candidates who are not necessarily a good culture fit. This then leads to an increased cost per hire as you're trying to outcompete and out-message and out-advertise in-house or in-country employers who have a better foothold. That can also then lead to increased time to fill. And finally, as we know, in other parts of the world, labor laws are a little more stringent, so it can be more costly and time-intensive when it comes to hiring and letting people go. So those decisions can linger a lot longer if you make the wrong decision. With that, I'm going to kind of hand it over to Deloitte folks to talk about how they approached in their employer brand, how they've globalized it, and the steps they did to do that. So, Tarek, I think I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you for the introduction and for the quick recap as well on why employer brand is important. It's always a good refresher, kind of something I keep on reminding myself about year after year. So thanks again for the invitation to speak today. I'm going to try to focus, well, Jen and I will focus most of our conversation today on sharing with you examples of what we've done and how we've done it and how we've localized what we've done. Before I do that, I thought it might be useful just to provide a little bit of context on Deloitte, our hiring priorities, the history of our brand, and the journey that we've taken to kind of defining our EVP and how we developed a globally consistent yet locally relevant employer brand. We'll then close with some lessons learned and some tips. So on this slide, just by way of setting some context, for those of you who might not know Deloitte, we're a global professional services firm. We provide services around audit, tax, legal, financial advisory, risk, and consulting services to some of the world's most exciting organizations. We have around 225,000 people and partners working within our network from around 100 or so locations. The key thing here is that we are a network of about 47 independent member firms that operate under a single brand called Deloitte. So what does that mean, and why am I even mentioning that? It means that each member firm operates pretty much independently, its own P&L. They have complete autonomy over their own strategies and operations, and this extends to decisions that they might take around talent, employer brand, their local brand, and so on. Having said that, we do operate under a single master brand called Deloitte, and we're also united by a single purpose, which is to make an impact that matters. Historically, Deloitte's grown through a mix of organic and inorganic growth. So until 2003, if you Google search Deloitte, you might have got, I'm not sure Google was around then, but if you did, you would have seen us being mentioned in lots of different ways. So it would have been Deloitte and Touche, it might have been Tomatsu, all these different names. In 2003, the Deloitte master brand that we are known as today was launched. So on the next slide, I'm going to just talk a little bit about our hiring profile. As a network, Deloitte makes around 60,000 hires a year. In this last fiscal year that ended in May 31, we made just over 60,000 hires across 5 key business areas. We're generally known in the market, in many of our markets, as an audit firm, despite the fact that actually audit only represents around 35% or so of our revenues. And actually 60% of our hires go into non-audit parts of our business. So right there, we have one reputation or brand issue there, which is to make sure that the market knows what Deloitte is, what we do, and what kind of careers we offer. Our hiring profile is heavily weighted towards campus hires. So 56% of our hires, around 35,000 hires a year, are straight from university. So as a result of that, as you might expect, much of our focus around developing our employer brand is pointed towards that particular audience. So on the next slide, I want to just show you our visual identity.
Tarek, are you there? You went on mute, I think. Tarek or Jen, are you guys there? Okay, bear with us for 1 minute here. Sorry, folks. 1 second. We're going to give Tarek a quick call here to make sure that he's still on. And Jen, if you're on, please let me know.
Consistency, I'd say, but the messaging really remained fairly inconsistent. not a huge amount of differentiation was actually being used at that point. And as a result of all these, this level of inconsistency, I would say we, still had an inconsistent approach and execution to not just our brand, but our candidate experience as well. So not a particularly clear sense of who we were and why we do what we do. So if we can move to the next slide, I just want to talk a little bit about, and the next one, please. I just want to talk a little bit about what we did. So in 2006, we actually embarked on a project to more clearly define our EVP. We took input from internal employees, external candidates, and stakeholders. And obviously the lessons that we learned from our existing strategies, and obviously stole and borrowed whatever we could from our competitors' successes as well. And our objective really of this exercise was to find our authentic voice so that we could more confidently and honestly communicate our proposition externally and internally to our own people. So the first step of doing this was really to define our global EVP. So the next slide really just talks us through why we did this and why that was important. And most of the reasons for that we've kind of covered off, or Mike covered off in the earlier material. But I would say if I just talk us through this particular slide around defining our EVP, this was a global program that was co-led by Global Talent and Global Brand with stakeholder involvement across all areas of our business. So what we came up with was something that resonated with our people. It was true to our vision and the type of organization we wanted to be. And it was something that our external stakeholders and our clients actually could connect with. So we wanted to base the EVP on objective and independent market research rather than hearsay or anecdotes. In any global organization, you're always going to get some markets that can shout louder, they perhaps have larger budgets, maybe they carry more of the hires, and we wanted to avoid the situation where we were being unduly influenced by those that did have the larger budgets and could shout the loudest. So we really wanted to be very objective. So what we did was that we conducted research in 22 countries, and we actually received input from over 26,000 employees and candidates. And that was really done through both our own primary research and also external secondary research. And really the entire journey that we've just summarized as succinctly as possible in this slide took around 6 months to complete. But it was trying to be as thorough and as objective as possible in coming up with a proposition that resonated with all of our key stakeholders. So,
that's awesome. Tariq, can I ask a question in here?
Of course, yeah, sure.
So how did you guys, like, I think a lot of folks, when I talk with customers, they are, they get it, they're on the same page as you, but their boss and their leadership may not get it. Any kind of tips or, or nuggets that you could tell on how you were able to kind of convince Deloitte leadership to kind of move on this issue?
Yeah, so I mean, I've got to say, there was some success by design and some success based on luck, frankly. Let me just cover the design part. The success by design was that we really worked very hard to position employer brand as a business issue. We talked at length about how candidates should be viewed as not just potential hires for Deloitte, but actually potentially current or potential future clients. So it was really important for us to be able to influence that group and treat them in the way that actually makes them not only want to join us, but potentially want to buy us as well. So making sure that we positioned it as a business issue was key. Connecting it to the bottom line, connecting it to the fact, like you mentioned earlier, Mike, in your introduction, it's really about reputation, and reputation means dollars, and accessing and having a stronger reputation not only protects you, but it also means that you're more likely to win client work, and you're also more likely to access and win the best talent. So that was the design part, and that was lengthy. It was, we need to be very clear and consistent in our communications, and pretty consistent about how we communicated it. The luck part was that we happened to have a number of people in our executive at the time who were just intuitively in tune with what we were talking about. They were big supporters of the concept of a strong brand, and we just capitalized on that opportunity. So the lesson for us really was create the business issue and strike while the iron was hot. Those are really the two things for us.
That's awesome. That's really cool to really connect the fact that, yes, future potential candidates are definitely potential purchasers and customers down the road. So that's a great linkage there that I think a lot of folks across industries can use.
Yeah, absolutely. And in an organization like ours, which is huge, like probably many of the people who's on the call, we, finding the right individuals and the right groups that want to listen to that message takes time. So perseverance is pretty important to this as well. So let me just talk a little bit about how we pulled this all together and what this looked like at the when we launched. So we ended up with really 3 types of collateral. We had material that talked to our student audience and to our experienced hire audience. And we also ended up with a completely different campaign that really transcended all of our audiences that I'm going to touch on now, which is the green on black at the bottom. So let me just share some of the ways in which we executed on the campaign and the kinds of materials that we produced to help drive the awareness of these materials, understanding of our EVP, and then also adoption of the material as well. Because how many of us have come up with, spent weeks coming up with the most fantastic idea and material, got really excited by it, launched it, only to find that it just falls completely flat. Happened to me several times. So for us, execution was key, and adoption was one of our major measures of success here. So on the next couple of slides, I'll just share with you some of the materials that we produced. This is the master guide, the master brand guide that was produced, that really contained everything around the brand, the library of images, the various executions of how that could be used in markets, the visual identity, and also, most importantly, the tone of voice. The tone of voice was really what was new about this in many respects for me. Prior to this, it's not so difficult to actually come up with a consistent visual identity. It's hard work, but you can get there. But actually speaking with a similar tone of voice is much harder. So this guide actually contained many cues to that. And on the next slide, there's a few more examples of what this looked like from a student collateral standpoint. So, compare this to a few slides ago. You're seeing a much more consistent look of feel, very distinctively Deloitte. Obviously, you can't read what's on these slides, what's on these image on the posters, but the tone of voice is much more consistent. It's sharp. It's much more succinct. And we're using these taglines, around trying to tap into individuals' desire for, crafting their own career, crafting their own direction, and telling them that they can actually achieve that with Deloitte. We also created some social media collateral as well. obviously, don't need to explain why that was important, but we continue to evolve and update materials and guidelines as new channels emerge and as new ways of using the channels emerge. So we have social media collateral, and we now also have collateral that's evolving for our mobile channels as well. Now, the single unifying asset in all of this is our green dot. This is the most recognizable part of Deloitte's brand, and it's our logo in effect. And I can't tell you how many meetings I've been to or people I've met who are like, "Oh, you guys are the green dot," and that just fills us with pride. We love that. The green dot for us really kind of punctuates all things about the Deloitte brand. It's not just a dot. It really is. It kind of has a life, and we bring it to life. It can be cheeky, it can be fun, and we think it has a unique personality. So on the next couple of slides, I just want to share with you some examples of how we bring this to life. So, this is an example of one of the campaigns that we've used the green dot for. And the concept is to create, a single or an expression of Deloitte's point of view which stands out from the crowd. So it's really intended to express a point of view on the issues and opportunities facing our clients, our potential recruits, and our people. And its objective is very, very simple. It's just to separate us from the crowd. So it's very well suited to crowded, busy environments. So think campus recruiting, even think big billboards, those sorts of executions. It really does stand out just because of the visuals. It's very bold, and what we try to do is always use the green dots as the hero set against a black background. So it's intended to really capture a point of view in a way that's kind of unique and unforgettable. And every green dot communication must have a clearly articulated point of view. So on the next slide, there's some additional recruitment material that we used, and you can see, two separate executions of this. In each case, the green dot's at the center. In the first one, it's at the center of a ripple. It's clearly the single object that activates the image. And on the right-hand side, it's essentially the door handle. It's without it, you cannot open the door. So it kind of sits there as the hero in both of those. Now, clearly localizing our material on our tone of voice and our campaigns is critical. So for the brand to resonate and thrive across our markets, localization is key. And we have done and continue to do a lot of research around messages, around language that resonates with local markets. We use our own surveys, and we also use external research to inform our understanding of what our target audience wants. We tend to also pay special attention to the gaps between what talent tells us are the most important attributes and how they rank us against those attributes. So for example, if innovation is the most important attribute in Germany, but we're ranked poorly for innovation, we will invest time and effort in amplifying our focus on that attribute, whilst clearly remaining consistent with the overall brand pillars and our overall talent experience. In Australia, for example, attracting more female talent and disrupting the graduate market through the use of technology is important. So we make a big play on analytics and challenging misconceptions of what it's like to work in the professional services organization and the place that gender balance has in that. So it's really important, obviously, to kind of understand your local markets, as Mike said, and this is just a snapshot of some of the things. I mean, obviously, I'm oversimplifying here with the messages, but let me just share some of the executions over the next couple of slides. In the UK, on the next slide, we have a Deloitte green igloo, and this was used heavily on campus, and the aim of this was obviously to, as I mentioned earlier, stand out. This was a distinctive looking thing. People walked around and thought, what is that bubbly thing in the corner? this bright green bubbly thing for that matter. As you might imagine, there were people gave it some different names to Igloo, but we called it the Igloo, and it was just a great way to kind of engage people as they walked around campus and have a conversation with them about careers at Deloitte. We brought the brand to life in other ways. On the next slide, you'll see some of the more again, other physical interpretations of the green color and of the green dot. So we have a bicycle that's again used on campus in South Africa. We have a 1 or 2 time campaign that was launched in Belgium, where all our new starters who are eligible for a company car received a Mini that was branded as you see in the photos. They were all launched onto the streets of Brussels on the same day, and it just had phenomenal impact. Again, using that kind of green personality, green dot personality. And then in the Middle East, after the events of the Arab Spring, we recalibrated our communications to tap much more strongly into a social media connected generation. So you'll see a lot more of our communications and our tactics being executed on social media in that part of the world. And then finally, from a global perspective, we tie all this together. We create the environment for countries to localize and to create messaging and speak in a tone of voice that resonates with their audience. But there are some very consistent themes at the global level, and one of those themes is all about creating leaders and creating and providing international experience. So we really wanted to take this beyond just attraction. These are our promotional materials that we use for our global internship program. It's really all about creating an environment for top interns to experience global work, either by traveling around the world or by participating in international experiences whilst they're on internship with us. We embed the language around global leadership, about the importance of international cross-cultural understanding and appreciation as part of that experience. So it's really embedding the green dot brand again into our messaging and putting it at the center of our promotional materials. So I want to hand over to my colleague Jen Powell from the US, who can just share a few more practical examples from the US with the group. So Jen, I'll hand over to you for a moment. I'm not sure if anyone, Mike, can you hear Jen? I can't hear her at the moment.
I can't hear her. So Jen, if you're on mute, please unmute yourself. Okay, not hearing you, Jen.
No.
Go for it, Tarek, if you want.
Oh, there we go.
Now we got you. Yep.
Sorry about that. So I'm still lobbying in the U.S. for the minis to make it to our country, but no success just yet. But I did want to share with you a couple of things that we are doing to really take the global brand and localize it for the U.S. So, like many organizations on the call today, we do share some technology platforms like our applicant tracking system that we use across countries and businesses. Another shared platform that we have that I wanted to share with you is Deloitte.com. So we recently launched a new career site within that global platform that we've developed customized content for each of our countries. So you're seeing a screenshot here of what we have in the U.S. Both Tarek and Mike talked about really localizing that message and using data to understand, what is it that's important to candidates in your country. And so that's absolutely what we've done here to tailor our messaging and develop content that's prioritized for our own candidates. Another example of leveraging global platforms is launching a new video production technology platform that actually just came out earlier this week, where there'll be a number of global brands that have been developed, but that the local member firms could then use to create their own custom videos in a way that's very quick and easy to get out and to tailor for our own messages. So really leveraging these global platforms allows us to utilize global people and dollars to really support these initiatives for us that help our local market. Moving on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about social. So Tarek mentioned some of the resources that Global has provided from a social media perspective. And so we definitely share the social love with the Global firm. And really our approach varies a bit by channel. So for example, with LinkedIn, we have one Deloitte presence and profile. For other channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, we have specific channels for U.S. recruiting and talent brand efforts. To support the sharing of best practices, Deloitte actually has established a global task force really focused on social media and brand. And through that task force, we've been able to pool our resources and our ideas to develop a social content strategy across countries, as well as a playbook that helps individual member firms in terms of developing content and measuring success. Related to our sponsors here specifically on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about how we leverage Glassdoor. So for us, our strategy is continuing to evolve here as the Glassdoor site continues to gain more traction in other countries, and they're evolving their suite of offerings. But currently we have one overall profile for Deloitte on Glassdoor. There are two other countries that have a distinct profile, but we're actually moving away from that process as Glassdoor has recently launched their localized profile feature. So for those of you that aren't familiar with that, the localized profiles allow organizations to tailor by country the content that visitors are seeing when they go to an employer's profile. So that includes things like the employer brand content, photos, and then country-specific reviews. So really looking at Glassdoor to be able to be a perfect example actually of what we're talking about today, using the power of a global brand but being able to customize it by geography. So Tarek mentioned earlier, a little bit about stealing ideas, and we certainly beg, borrow, and steal within our different member firms. So I'll share a couple of examples of that. The first, which you see on this slide here, is a video that we recently launched in the U.S. that was based on a concept that our New Zealand member firm had done around finding your fit. So as Tarek said, a large portion of our hires come from campus, and so we really wanted to give those folks an understanding of where they might fit in the organization and if they would be, frankly, a good culture fit for us. And so this video is a choose your own adventure type of concept with about a dozen different interaction points that can create up to 840 different permutations depending on what you choose. And we really have put our own U.S. spin on this, similar concept to New Zealand, but put our own spin to show our culture and a bit more of the fun side of Deloitte. And then the final example I'll share is also related to building on best practices. On the next slide, you'll see Deloitte University. So this was something that the U.S. Launched a number of years ago, and that has built traction across the world. So the U.S. firm opened Deloitte University, our leadership center, in 2011, located in Westlake, Texas, on 107 acres. You see beautiful pictures there. And we welcome 50,000 learners each year from more than 81 countries. And it's really been a great way for us to add to our brand and really share our culture as well as developing our people. And this has really taken off and demonstrated that there's value beyond that, the U.S., for this concept of DU. So it's actually been developed and currently operates in the U.S., in Hyderabad, as well as Brussels, serving the EMEA region. So shared a couple of examples here of how the U.S. has leveraged our global brand and resources, but I'll turn it back over to Tarek to share a little bit more about how we've driven broader global adoption.
Okay, thanks, Jen. So I'm conscious that we've shared a lot of images and a lot of ideas with you, so let me just try to pull all this together and just kind of talk a little bit about what are some of the key lessons that we learned through this journey. So I've just listed a number out over here, and I'll just talk through some of the ones that I think are most pertinent. I think the most important thing is when you're dealing with an audience, a stakeholder group, an internal stakeholder group that has variable capabilities, resources, and budgets. It's really important to clearly make sure that whatever you're delivering is flexible. It can be used by your stakeholders in your countries, regardless of what their level of maturity might be. So making sure that it's something that's very easy to understand and execute was really important for us. The second point was something that doesn't sound particularly interesting now, but it was really controversial back then. This concept of actually collaborating and working with your marketing teams, with people from other departments, to ensure that you actually come up with something that speaks to all of your external stakeholders. There's really no point you having one brand for your clients that completely conflicts with the one that you might want to convey to your candidates. And the point around kind of key stakeholders was really important. For us, it was clear that there was a lot of ground level support for something like this, but unless we got some of our key leaders on board, this is not going to happen. And building our leadership's expectations around what this was going to look like and what it could actually accomplish was really important. And it wasn't just about saying this is about dollars, but actually it was also about saying, think 5-10 years from here, what this could actually allow us to do if we are all speaking with a slightly more consistent voice, and providing kind of that vision that leaders could buy into was really important. And we've talked a lot about flexibility. The most important success factor, I would say, is to make sure that is whatever it is that you're doing can be used in various markets without significant change to the core master idea. We went through a whole host of iterations of concepts that were rejected, either because the wording just wouldn't work in one country, the color scheme might not work, the visuals and some of the some of the suggestions around the visuals just weren't going to work, and we really had a really long, hard look at everything that was put in front of us to make sure that it would pass the test in as many markets as possible. So in terms of some additional lessons learned, I think I just want to close with a few additional things here. For me, this is really much more about behavior than collateral. We really view the materials that we create as a conversation starter. But actually, it's the behavior that's going to breathe life into the brand. It's the behavior that's going to sustain the brand, and that's where you're going to get your innovation and your adoption. The materials will only last so long. Educating, you have to we underestimated how much education we needed to invest in, how much we needed to actually continue to convey the message, to drive the message through as many internal channels as possible, and to build ambassadorship internally as well for this. So creating this environment where innovation was welcome was really important for us as well. We have probably come from an environment where our brand team was viewed as a compliance type of organization to one today, and I would say for the last few years, where it's really viewed as a strategic business partner. And that's really important, that we're not there to tell people what they should not do, but we're there to try to help them understand what could they do. And that was really important. That was an important mind shift that really released, I think, the innovative spirit within the organization. And then finally, clearly sharing best practices and leading practices and successes around the network was important. As Jen mentioned, I mean, we are unashamed about using each other's ideas, building on those ideas, and creating sometimes incremental innovation is just as good as big bang or major innovation. So being able to actually share those practices and show people what success can look like is really important, because it's not only the large resource-rich parts of our network that can do great things. We get innovation from all parts of the network. Some really small markets that you just may not expect would be necessarily as innovative actually in truth are. So we just learned to be really open-minded to that. So with that, I am conscious that we've shared a lot of information, and I'd like to just pass back over to Mike.
Awesome, thanks Tarek and Jen. That was very informative. Thank you too for walking us through, how you thought about it, how you proceeded, and some of the nuts and bolts on execution and collateral that came out of these efforts. So that's really helpful. I think folks will be able to find that useful and take some of those nuggets back. I see that there's some chat on Twitter about this, so it looks like it's resonating. I wanted to leave folks with a couple things on Glassdoor before we get into some questions. So if you have questions, please go ahead and send them through, and we'll try to get to them. We have a bunch of resources here at Glassdoor for folks to learn more about employer branding, and also we touched upon this a bunch actually. Recruitment marketing, this concept of recruiters as marketers, and how those roles are kind of converging in terms of promoting a brand and actually testing messaging and experiences and things like that to build a stronger employer brand and attract more candidates. So we have a bunch of resources on the Glassdoor website that folks should check out. If you're not a customer of Glassdoor already, I recommend that you guys sign up for a free employer account. That'll allow you to claim your profile and start putting some messaging out there to attract candidates and start building your employer brand. And for our customers out there, Jen had mentioned that we do have a new localized profile available. So I would encourage you to get in contact with your representatives at Glassdoor and start discussing that if that's a big need for you. It's a great way to really take your brand to the next level and start targeting candidates in the UK, Australia, Canada, France, Germany. We've definitely gone global, and now we're supporting multiple languages. So Glassdoor is definitely riding the wave of globalization, and we'd love to be there with you. So with that, I'll leave it open to Shay for some questions.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for the great info, everybody. This is for the Deloitte team. What kind of research did you do prior to deciding to invest in a global employer brand?
So I'll have a crack at this. As I mentioned earlier, I mean, we have been a research driven department for a number of years. So we've constantly been looking at our external research to see what we can learn from that. Prior to the actual decision to proceed with the EVP approach, we have we've made use of our own candidate surveys, where we actually survey both our campus and experienced hire candidates on the experience during the recruiting cycle, as well as their perception of Deloitte, and how well we actually meet their expectations for some of the key attributes that their primary employer would have. So our own research was important to this. We also leveraged a lot of external research from research organizations, some publicly available, some that we actually partnered with directly to understand more about our particular audiences. We also leveraged some of our own consulting based research. So we have our consulting arm actually provides research provides services to clients in this sort of area as well. So we were able to leverage much of that research too. So I would say research was the base and the foundation of much of our business case around this. You can use anecdotal research or anecdotal evidence as much as you like, and I think we would always try to color the actual quantitative data with anecdotal evidence around it as well. But there's nothing like hard numbers that talk about how attractive you are in a particular market, what the key attributes of attractive employers are, and how you stack up against those. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Hey, another question coming in is around Deloitte and their approach to marketing overall. So I know Deloitte doesn't really market on, on TV. There's not really ads or. So how do you guys kind of, deal with that and kind of, recognize that that's not necessarily a channel for you? So how do you shore that up?
Yeah, it's a really good point. We have a really minute amount of marketing that gets done for kind of client purposes. So, culturally, shifting our mindsets, shifting the mindsets of leaders and individuals that have not really ever invested heavily in marketing per se, to get them, to accept the concept of putting money behind employer brand is a tough ask. We are still not an organization that you'll see on TV ads. You might see us on some billboards here or there, and I think that's just essentially partly a function of our culture. We are not a stand up and shout from the rooftops type of organization. We rely a lot more on our points of view, on our intelligence, and our reports and materials that get produced to engage clients and to convince them that we're a partner that they should be working with. So it is a challenge. It's an uphill struggle to make that shift in an organization that is just culturally slightly allergic to the concept of spending marketing dollars. So what we actually had to do to some extent was leverage the channels that our global brand group were comfortable with, where we could make progress in. So in some cases, we've embedded our career messages into some of our traditional kind of B2B channels, such as reports and research material and insights.
Mike, I'll add just a couple points to that real quickly. So in the U.S.
Perfect.
Specifically, we also don't do a lot of advertising, although our consulting business has recently taken over some airports. So you may see some of the messaging there. But I think it's really challenged us from a recruitment brand perspective to be really strategic, and if you can call a 65,000 person organization scrappy, and really making sure that we are using our limited recruitment brand and resources effectively. So understanding from our recruiting leaders, what are their really top hiring needs, where they're having a hard time finding talent, and making sure that we're driving recruitment campaigns that are very much tailored to the individual needs of those types of candidates, so that we're getting out in front of them. And we can't do them all, but trying to understand across the board, where are those most significant needs, and then how can we best reach those people. So I'd say that's one of the things that we've done tactically speaking. And this past year, I think there was like 5 different personas, if you will, that we really went after and tried to do more to attract that talent. And then one final thing, what we're trying to do more, and I think probably a lot of organizations are going down this path as well, is building ambassador type of programs within your employees. So obviously we've got a lot of followers on some of our corporate social channels, but the real power is in the network of all of our professionals. So developing a program and investing in tools that allow us to spread messages that people can then share through their own channels.
That is awesome. And full disclosure, I was am a Deloitte ambassador. So I was working at Deloitte before, and as you know, Jen, went to business school and with other folks from Deloitte, and it was definitely a powerful thing to, talk to other students about those experiences, because everybody wants to know what it's like to work at these different companies, and to have a bunch of friends from a similar company being able to kind of talk to that perspective and those experiences was a pretty powerful thing. Some other big questions that are coming in. This is a good one. So let's say leadership is bought into this project and this vision of building a global employer brand, but we want to zoom in and really prioritize and tackle one initiative at a time. What would be like maybe that first initiative you would tackle to maybe prove out the value and the efforts of this global branding project that you're going through? So where would you guys begin, I guess?
Yeah, it is a good question. So, yeah, where would you begin? It's an interesting one. I mean, I think I hope this is not an overgeneralization. So I'm going to try to answer the question as specifically as I can. I think for me, it's always about really pinpointing. You know, if there was really just one thing we could do and one thing we could do well, I probably would have chosen for us to focus in on a particular segment of our audience and, you know, really home in on their needs and their expectations and essentially create a new experience or an experience that really would attract them. So an example of this would be, you know, looking at top students, let's say at certain universities. If there's a particular set of universities that are just really going to be key to driving your employer brand, you really need to recruit from, and you know that the influence that you know, being successful in that university has on others. So, for example, if you're going to be particularly strong in you know, in engineering, and you really want to focus on that particular audience, targeting, you know, the one or two top engineering schools, really creating an experience for those that then through word of mouth and through, you know, other, you know, social media approaches might help, might reach others, would probably give you kind of more bang for your buck than you know, a broader approach that we took. I don't think you can shortcut the methodology, in my view, around, you know, needing to do your research and understanding your market and then creating a response to that research. But what I think you can do is narrow down the segments that you want to focus on, and maybe use some pilots or some kind of, you know, mini experiments to try to test concepts on a narrow audience, and that will probably be achieved with you know, lower budget and in quicker time than kind of trying to do a slightly more broad approach. So hopefully that answers the question to some extent.
Yeah, I think that helps. Focusing in on a group is a good way to just kind of test the validity of your messaging and your branding efforts. So totally makes sense. Another question that we have is around, you know, kind of looking forward now, right? So you've implemented your global employer brand. You've done all that research to understand what the messaging needs are of each local community and what the global organization needs are as a whole. But how often do you plan on going back and researching and updating your EVP? You know, what's kind of your maintenance and monitoring mode and optimization process going forward with your EVP and in your employer brand?
Yeah, again, a really good question, and I would just make I would draw a distinction over here between research and understanding and acting. You know, sometimes for various reasons and various priorities, your ability to actually execute on what you know is somewhat limited, and you might just need to bide your time. We are constantly, and I would say on an ongoing basis, tracking our EVP. We're tracking our perception that our key audience has of us in the market, and where possible, I would say in most of our markets around the world, we are acting on that intelligence. What we are probably a little bit slower at doing is making significant updates or upgrades to our global master brand to, you know, reflect, you know, perhaps the consolidated body of research that we might get through a full-on EVP project. So, you know, if you look now at some of our material that's coming out in the US or in other markets, you'll see that it's quite a bit further along than some of the material that I've shared with you today, and perhaps, you know, what Jen shared is very actually it's really recent. So we are you know, constantly evolving in the markets, and that happens on an annual basis. There's an annual review cycle that takes place in many markets around our employer brand in that particular market. Are our messages still on point for our target audiences? But at the global level, we're you know, we're monitoring, but we're probably only doing minor refreshes for the time being. Really just biding our time because we have some big plans and that will come to market in the next year or so. So we're just holding off until those hit the market before we can rather than doing anything in the interim. But Jen, I don't know if you have anything to add to that from a US perspective.
Yeah, I'd say it's pretty consistent. I don't think kind of the core of our messages really evolves too significantly from year to year. I'd say every 3 to 5 years, really taking a deep look at that. But certainly every year, refreshing campaigns, using different themes that are supportive of that EVP just to keep it fresh. But I would agree with all that you shared, Tarek.
Awesome. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Thanks, you guys, so much. Thanks both to Tarek, Mike, and Jen for joining us today. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to enter those in, and we'll try to follow up with you as soon as we can. But just for those of you who asked, you will receive the PowerPoint presentation as well as the recording after we are done here. So once again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Great content, and we look forward to seeing you at another upcoming webinar. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Tarek.
Thanks,
guys.